A few weeks ago, we looked at the TimeSplitters trilogy, the newest PlayStation 2 games to hit PS Plus. Believe it or not, these were the first PlayStation 2 games to be given the review crew treatment, which led a lot of other people to wonder when we'd be tackling the rest of the PS2 games that were released in 2024. Well, the answer to that question is right now! We're gonna go back and look at 3 PlayStation 2 games that were recently added to the PlayStation Plus subscription. I'm talking about classics like Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus, Summoner, and Tomb Raider Legend. It's cool news that these games were finally added to PlayStation 5, but are any of them actually worth playing? To answer that question, I decided to flip through the pages of Electronic Gaming Monthly, Edge, Game Informer, and other classic magazines to see what the critics said back when these games first came out. Oh, I sure hope you're ready for some strong disagreements, because this is a very divisive episode of PlayStation Plus Review Crew.
Oh, Lucozade! Thanks, lovey. Oh. Spartacus! Boris! I'll give you woof woof.
By 2006, Lara Croft was in something of a rut. The last entry, Tomb Raider, the Angel of Darkness, was fraught with development problems, which ultimately led to it underperforming both sales-wise and with the critics. It was clear that for Lara to continue her raiding ways, she's going to need to do something to reinvent herself. The result was Tomb Raider Legends, the franchise's first reboot. This allowed Crystal Dynamics to rethink a lot of the gameplay elements and incorporate other trends that were happening around the industry. It also just felt like a natural time to transition to the next generation, with the PlayStation 3 coming out later that year and the Xbox 360 already on store shelves. Unfortunately, we're talking about the PlayStation 2 version. As you can imagine, it was the Xbox 360 version that everybody wanted to cover. So what we're doing is we're pulling from a limited amount of sources. Thankfully, Edge is one of the few magazines to cover the last generation version. Giving it an 8 out of 10, they concluded, to suggest the Legend was a jack of all trades and master of none would be unfair. Much of Crystal's work here is masterful, not the least the Lara model itself, which links artful animation with such elegance as to make one of the best ever created. And whatever streaming technology has facilitated the near-exclusive use of high-resolution textures is similarly deserving of praise. But you can see how such a claim would be made. Legend covers many bases and has knowingly sacrificed a considerable part of the purity which, for many, made Tomb Raider memorable to begin with. Some may argue over what the series should have become, but what's important is that it made that tough decision for itself and established a rock-solid foundation for the inevitable, now justified successors. While Edge's 8 out of 10 is the lowest score we're going to talk about, you're going to find that all of the Tomb Raider Legend reviews are all in that 80% range. For example, it averaged an 8.3 out of 10 from Electronic Gaming Monthly. Jeremy summed it up this way: what makes Legend such a welcome change from Raider norm is that it completely reinvents the aging franchise. The graphics are wonderful, and Lara moves fluidly, yet still tackles obstacles with precision. Even the narrative is engrossing, thanks to the running commentary by Lara's own Cortana Come-Latelys. The loneliness that made the first game so haunting is absent, but the trade-off is a much greater sense of purpose to all the grave spelunking. Lara does still have a few stumbling blocks to overcome, though. The overhauled combat engine makes the gameplay fun, but targeting stinks, the bad guy's AI is spotty, and long-range skirmishes are like watching stormtroopers battle. Everybody's shooting, but nobody's getting hit. Dana also liked the game, though complained about the ending. Unlike Jeremy, I didn't like the cliffhanger ending. I don't like having to wait more than a year for resolution. But when the next game does come out, rest assured, I'll be there to see what happens. Now, before we move on to the highest score, it's worth mentioning that GamePro ended up giving Tomb Raider Legend a 4 out of 5. Unfortunately, they didn't cover the PlayStation 2 version, so we're not counting it. However, we are counting Game Informer, who gave the game an impressive 8.75 out of 10. Tomb Raider Legend fails to be a reinvention of any genres, but succeeds in every way at reinventing itself. It walks that fine line of pleasing longtime fans, the folks who just watched the movies, and even brand new players, all at once. Don't miss out because it might be popular to hate on the franchise these days. Legend reminds us why we fell in love with Lara in the first place. Sure, it didn't get 9s and 10s, but pretty much everybody agreed that Tomb Raider Legend was a good reboot that breathed new life into the franchise. Now the Tomb Raider is gearing up for a third reboot. It may actually be worth going back to Legend to see what they got right and what they got wrong. Now here's a PlayStation 2 game that you probably haven't thought about in the last 20 years. First released in 2000, right alongside the PS2, Summoner is a divisive action role-playing game that was published by THQ. It's probably best known as the game Volition made right before striking gold with the Red Faction franchise. It's a fairly straightforward adventure game with a bunch of side quests and graphics that will constantly remind you that this is a first-generation PlayStation 2 game. No matter what you think of the mix of real-time and tactical combat and the fantasy story, you have to admit that this is a real weird turn for a company best known for games like Descent, Free Space, and Saints Row. But hear me out now, could it be that Summoner is not only a misunderstood gem, but it's also one of the PlayStation 2's best launch games? The answer to that question depends entirely on which magazine you subscribe to. Let's go ahead and start with Electronic Gaming Monthly, which was right in the middle of the two sides, giving Summoner an average score of 4.8 out of 10. Milkman found the whole experience to be incredibly frustrating. This is one of the most aggravating RPGs I've ever played. Summoner has a great storyline and well-constructed ambiance, but the list of things it does wrong is comprehensive. A horrible frame rate, a stunning amount of pop-ups, a really sluggish, ineffective battle system, inanely long load times, wait, there's more, and towns that are too big, sprawling cityscapes that are hard to navigate and have too many NPCs to talk to. Volition certainly has some great ideas, but the execution lets the side down. Ryan agreed. I wanted to like Summoner, I really did, but it's one of the ugliest games I've ever played. The textures are incredibly low resolution, and the drawing, especially at the first city you'll visit, is horrendous. This is PlayStation 2? And let me tell you, EGM wasn't the only magazine to trash Summoner, as Edge went as low as a 4 out of 10. That's more or less the same score that Next Generation gave the game in their 73rd issue. They argued that it should have been left to brew a lot longer, and where the game suffers most is its technology. Load times are as long as 30 seconds, and they happen every time you transition between scenes, whether it's a random enemy battle or changing between subsections in a city or dungeon. As if that weren't maddening enough, the graphics engine isn't up to snuff either. It's plagued by recurrent pop-in, sorting issues, drawing, and the occasional frame rate drop. And oh yeah, don't forget about the monsters that occasionally attack you right through the walls, purely due to collision detection problems. With all the technical glitches and bland graphics, we have to say, honestly, that we had hoped for better. But hang on a second, because there are a number of magazines that, dare I say, actually liked the game. No, really. For example, the official UK PlayStation 2 magazine gave Summoner an 8 out of 10. That's the same score that you saw from PSM. And Game Informer? That's right, even they liked the game enough to give it an 8. If you thought Squaresoft created engrossing stories with more than enough substance, wait until you see what Volition has in store for you. If you like games with novels worth of reading material, you'll love Summoner. It's a good game and a pretty decent book as well. The loose camera really needs another month or two in development, and the real-time combat, while sufficient as is, could use some tweaking. Other than this, Summoner's mechanics are quite good. Volition claims that Summoner is a 40-hour role-playing game. I could see players cruising through it in this time, but if you want to conquer every little side quest, I'd say you're looking at a 70 to 80-hour quest. In many regards, Summoner is a PC game that's hiding within a console skin. Unlike Final Fantasy, kids won't be able to jump into this game. It's designed for an older audience, and the dark plot reflects it. For all the role-playing game fans out there, I think you'll be surprised by how engrossing this game truly is. Take that, Squaresoft stands! Final Fantasy is for babies! Okay, maybe that's not exactly what Game Informer was saying, but that's definitely what I heard. And you know what? Maybe he's right, and this whole time we haven't been giving Summoner a fair shot. Well, now it's your time, I suppose, to see if Volition created the superior RPG, or if it's just total trash like the rest of the critics seem to think.
Summoner has survived. Find him.
Summoner lives.
Stop him from challenging the gods and releasing the dragons. Your mighty empire is in jeopardy. Find the summoner. Destroy him.
Follow me, Joseph. There is one last thing we must do.
Summoner lives on PlayStation 2.
Rated T for teens.
After writing Crash Bandicoot through the 32-bit generation, Sony knew they were going to need to come up with a new platforming hero for the PlayStation 2. First came Jak and Daxter from Naughty Dog, the same team that gave us Crash Bandicoot. This was followed in 2002 with another cartoony duo, Ratchet and Clank. That same year also brought Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus, a quirky little caper that mixed spies, stealth, and platforming into one great package. Well, all three of Sony's PlayStation 2 era platforming franchises are wildly different. Sly Cooper takes the genre to places that it had just never been before. It's the kind of platformer that often feels like it was inspired more by Metal Gear Solid than Super Mario Bros., which really alone is enough to set it apart from the pack. With such a wildly different take on the genre, let's see what the critics said back in 2002. Let's go ahead and start with Edge, the one and only publication that wasn't completely won over by Sly's charm. Giving it a 6 out of 10, they concluded that Sly Raccoon gets all the basics right. The camera, the bane of most 3D platformers, behaves well, allowing a lot of player rotation and rarely putting you in danger by panning away at crucial moments. It's not difficult, but there is replay value. For PS2 owners wanting a good-looking stroll down memory lane, this is engaging for the most part. As we creep up the rating scale, we see the Game Pro gave this first Sly Cooper entry a solid 4 out of 5. Playboy, yes, Playboy, also reviewed the game and gave it an 85%, which is also the percentage chance that you're going to come down with something contagious if you spend too much time in the grotto. Wedged right between these two is Electronic Gaming Monthly, who may have given Sly an average score of 8.3 out of 10, but that doesn't mean the critics agreed. Darren gave the game an 8.5 and called it a solid blend of 3D platforming action and stealth adventure. Besides the top-notch animation and graphics, other highlights include the mini-games and unlockable power-up moves. Some will take issue with the frequent one-hit kills and perhaps Sly's under 15-hour length, but the game is definitely worth a rental, and if you plan on exploring every nook and cranny, you won't be disappointed. Jennifer, on the other hand, was disappointed. She gave the game a 7.5 out of 10 and explained, One glimpse of Sly's fat raccoon tail undulating against the noir cartoon Paris backdrop, and I knew this game was going to be fun to watch. I just wasn't sure I'd enjoy playing what looked like your standard platformer. The die and try method gets old, but Sly does strike a nice balance, and finishing a level always delivers a satisfying thrill. Further up the ladder, we see Entertainment Weekly give Sly Cooper an impressive A-, a strong score for a magazine that was a little inconsistent when it came to platformers. Game Informer also loved Sly, giving him and his team a fantastic 9.25 out of 10. However, it was the official US PlayStation magazine that ended up going the highest, giving the Thievius Raccoonus a perfect 5 out of 5. If there are any complaints, the only thing I can think of is that you can beat the game in less than 10 hours. There's no way you'll have opened everything up in that time, but you will have seen all the levels, fought all the bosses, and seen the first end sequence. The extra stuff really helps to stretch things out though, and if you're anything like me, you'll happily sit for another 10 hours to do so. Yeah, while it's a little short for a 3D platformer, this first Sly Cooper game is just a whole lot of fun. It perfectly sets up a bunch of even better sequels, and playing it on the PlayStation 5 will make you yearn for Sucker Punch to return to this series for a next generation sequel. Make it happen.
What was that all about?
Sly Cooper, he's one cunning, devious Thievius Raccoonus. Rated E for everyone.
Hey, thanks for watching me break down these classic reviews. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new episodes just like this every single time an old school game gets released on a modern console. We have a whole playlist with, I'm not even joking here, hundreds of these episodes. It's gonna take you a while to binge watch all of that. Now, here's the question I have for you. What's your favorite era of Tomb Raider? Man, we're about to enter the third reboot and fourth generation. So I'm curious what they're gonna do different this time around. Let me see which generation you like the most in the comments below. In other news, we'll be back next week with a special episode where we decide what Natsumi game should be reimagined next. Look, they still have a lot of amazing games to reintroduce. I'm telling you, this is exciting times, people. While you wait for that, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.